We are live.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and good afternoon, good evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this session, which has got the title of Leapfrogging or Treading Water, Utilities Picking Up the Pace at the Water Energy Food Nexus. And my name is Andre Jikas. I am the Chief of Urban Basic Services. And on behalf of GWOPA, the organizers of the Congress, I'm very happy to send greetings to you from the UN campus here in Bonn, from where we are staging and hosting this online conference. Circular economy itself is becoming a very important issue in our cities. And of course, water and sanitation operators actually have a lot to contribute in this area. And our water operators can actually do a lot of work in terms of reclaiming wastewater, but also recovering resources and also recovering energy. That's actually contributing towards the nexus between water, energy, and food. And in today's session, we'll be seeing quite some interesting presentations from operators on what they're doing to reclaim wastewater, the challenges which they have. I would also like to note and thank the contribution of the Bonn Water Network for their contributions to the session. And just to mention, there are two technical issues. Please, on the right-hand side, there's a blue tab. Please join the participants chat. And there is also simultaneous interpretation for you to follow this in other languages, French and Spanish. And I'd also like to thank all the speakers and participants who are making this Congress a great success. And now I'd like to hand over to Annabelle, the head of the Water Network, to take us through the program and the next steps. Thank you very much. And over to you.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Andre, and welcome to this session. So our Bonn Water Network is a network of 10 institutions with long-standing experience in the water sector. We're all based here in Bonn at the Rhine, have 3 UN members, several university institutions, think tanks and partners in training and practice. And we've created this network a year ago, have an interesting website, just have a look and join our sessions. But now let me introduce today's facilitators. So my colleague Saravanan is a senior researcher at the German Development Institute. Thanks a lot to you, Saravanan, for organizing this session. He is a political and medical geographer from university in India, UK, and Australia, brings with him expertise on institutions, processes, and mechanisms through which societies, governments, and organizations shape and reshape urban water management. So he has led project teams in different regions of South Asia, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and Western Africa to examine the interface of research and policy on water management issues. Welcome, Saravanan. And second, Josiane Nikema. Thank you so much for agreeing to facilitate today's session. She's a process engineer, holds a PhD in chemical engineering, applied to environmental protection from Canada, and is currently working for the International Water Management Institute, which I'm sure you all know. She leads the research group that focuses on circular economy and water pollution issues and addresses the global mission of promoting sustainable and inclusive growth under changing natural resource flows and capital, driven by increasing urbanization, agricultural intensification, and climate change. So many of the topics that we are talking about today. Josiane works to encourage the adoption of waste management solutions that can durably support agriculture, help mitigate impacts of climate change, and promote sustainable development. That's also from my side. I wish you a wonderful session today and welcome you also to other events from the network. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome to you all. We are very happy to have this session with you today. We have put together for you a great session. I believe it's going to be with key presenters, people with a lot of experience working in different parts of the world. So that we want to bring together today for the discussion. This first sub-session, we are going to discuss about innovative approaches that can be adopted for water reclamation and integrated resource recovery. So our presentations, we have 4 of them that are lined for you. Um, 4 presentations, but before we go into the presentations, please get ready. We will have one Menti question for you. And so get ready to connect to it. We will have 4 presentations, 7 minutes, and then after the presentations, we will have a 15 minutes allocated for questions and answers, and we'll have the opportunity to engage with you and also listen to you, your experience, your perspectives around this topic, which is extremely important. We have overall about 45 to 50 minutes for this session, so I hope we'll make the most out of it. So let's go to Menti now, and let's I would say a little bit appreciate your perception about water and water reuse. So we want to understand from you what you think could be the most critical barriers when it comes to adoption of circular economy principles in water management. We know circular economy is very important, but then what are those issues that that we should be taking into consideration, that we should be addressing? So please go to menti.com and use this code 96517340. And let's respond to this first question, please. So the question is, what do you think are the most, you can enter up to 2 critical barriers to adoption of circular economy principles in water management. We know circular economy is a must, it's a good thing. Recycling resources is good, it's part of sustainable practices, it's helpful for the environment, and also sometimes very much, I would say, making financial sense to go this way. So what do you think are those barriers? Okay, so we have some responses that are coming in. Poor governance is coming in, yes, absolutely. And inadequate capacity. Yes, please continue entering your answers. Financing, political economy, acceptance. Okay, working in silo, I think that's very good. And I think through a conference like this one, we have an opportunity to share more and to work closer, and to share what we are doing in different parts of the world as well. That's great. Nothing is really coming out very strongly. It means that all these issues are playing, let's say, almost equal role. Yeah, financing is another one. Lack of incentives, yes. So through the presentations that we are going to have today, we are going to touch on some of these issues, and we are also going to present examples how these issues are being addressed in the local context to make sure that we are able indeed to get I would say business models that are sound, that are effective, that are sustainably implemented by the communities, by the water operators in the countries where we are going to have those cases. So for presentation, and let's begin now with a presentation on innovative wastewater reuse models, focusing on insights from a compendium of empirical cases in developing countries. So this presentation is going to be given by Dr. Solomé Gebrez-Kaber, and she is a researcher within the Circular Economy and Water Pollution Research Group of the International Water Management Institute. Her current research focuses on developing business models around circular economy, assessing the economic, social, and environmental sustainability of investing in different business models, as well as assessing the investment climate for private sector investment in circular economy businesses, especially in the sub-Saharan African region. So Solomé, over to you. You have 7 minutes. To share your perspectives around this topic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Josiane, for the nice introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. In this presentation, I'll be talking about wastewater reuse models that we have analyzed from around the world, mostly in developing countries. Next slide, please. So when we talk about water reuse, I think the first speaker has also talked about urbanization, as urbanization is becoming the driver for our way of doing things in terms of production and consumption levels. Urbanization has been the key driver for the changing the traditional flows of food and resources. And with increased urbanization comes increased consumption levels, and this has resulted in significant waste generation, both liquid and solid waste, especially in developing countries where there are no appropriate treatment facilities or non-functioning treatment facilities. It has resulted in environmental and health challenges. And in addition to that, cities are becoming vast nutrient sinks, while in rural areas, thousands and millions of farmers are struggling with depleted soils to feed the urban centers. Cities are becoming vast nutrient sinks because consumptions are there, but these resources are not flowing back to the economy. And in addition to that, we see a lot of cities where we have freshwater scarcities. Therefore, we need to change the ways of our production and consumption habits. And that has necessitated the need for circular economy approaches. So in this presentation, I'll be focusing on some of the key innovations that we have looked at around the world. Next slide, please. So this figure here is what we call as ladder of innovation. What it shows is that there are different options for wastewater treatment and reuse options. But at the very least, wastewater treatment should be achieving safe disposal for environmental and health safeguarding. So at the bottom left, you see that the minimum that treatment should do is to safeguard our environment. Then from that, you can also have other value creation options. So if you look at the top, up top, where we have innovations where freshwater drinking or potable water could be recovered from wastewater. In between, you have different options. For example, wastewater could be used for irrigation. You can also recover energy. You can also recover nutrients, as well as carbon credits in certain cases and energy recovery. Therefore, what this innovation ladder shows you is that there are different options depending on the local context, depending on the financing you have, skills you have. Different options are there. Some of them are low cost and some of them are high tech. So depending on what is available, different resource recovery and reuse options are available. Next slide, please. So in EMI, we have developed or assessed different business cases from around the world. So this figure is showing where we have analyzed some of the business cases. For this presentation, I'm focusing on 2 business cases from 2 countries. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the first case that I would like to present is wastewater-fed aquaculture model. This is a unique system where waste stabilization pond systems can be used to recover some products and services. For example, water could be used to produce fish feed, fish and fruits. We have seen that in Ghana, for example, in Bangladesh, where there are stabilization ponds, and at the last maturation pond, you can introduce a fish or fish feed like ductwork system and so on. And this has been applied through or implemented through establishing of public-private partnerships where there is a win-win situation for both parties. Therefore, the capital cost comes from the infrastructure comes from the public sector, and then the private entity comes with their entrepreneurial skills to run the business or the facility. And this has a strong replication potential in countries where we have functioning waste stabilization ponds. However, key here is there should be a compliance with health safety protocols, since we are using treated wastewater for fish production and other fruits and crops. There is a need to comply with safety protocols. Next slide, please. And we do have also other emerging models, the swap model. This is basically intersectoral water exchange. So the figure shows that agricultural users could forego their rights to use fresh water to urban centers in exchange for treated wastewater. So therefore, this model supports the transfer of freshwater use rights from agriculture to domestic use in exchange for treated wastewater. And this can be initiated by water utilities, where they are the brokers. They make agreement with the farmers for the farmers to give up their freshwater use in exchange for treated wastewater that is coming from domestic and other industrial uses. And the farmers will transfer their rights to the utility. But this model is a bit complicated and challenging since it requires a well-defined water use rights and entitlements. And there should be also enabling environment or clear regulations that allow the reuse of wastewater for irrigation. And there is also a need for developing incentive mechanisms. Why would a farmer forego his freshwater use for wastewater? So therefore, there is a lot of requirement in terms of awareness creation campaign and also incentive mechanisms for the farmers to agree to give up their water use rights for treated wastewater. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the water reuse models, they are key pathways to water security in a rapidly urbanizing world. Without circular economy, our water resources will be depleted with increasing population in urban centers. They are putting a lot of stress on resources. Therefore, we have to change our ways of consumption, where we have make, dispose, use and dispose, and change to, or go to a circular economy approach. And water reuse is more than irrigation. We have seen this, it's very common that wastewater is used for irrigation, but beyond that, we do have other innovative business models that could be used. And there is also the need for capacity development and strong incentive mechanisms for intersectoral collaboration. In addition to that, there are complex governance issues involved, especially with the swap model or intersectoral exchange models. There are complex governance issues involved, such as covering rights, legal frameworks, and responsibilities. Next slide, please. So I would like to conclude with this book here. The case studies that I presented are from this book, and it's freely available. We have developed more than 24 business models and analyzed about 60 business cases. So it's a catalog of business models where innovators or any interested investors could look at to see if some of these business models could be interesting for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salome, for a very great presentation that always also sets up the stage very well, very nicely for the other presenters to come. For all the participants, please make use of the chat to ask your questions. Please enter your questions in the chat, and we will come to that immediately after the 4 presentations, and we'll take them and we'll discuss them. We'll ask the presenters to share their views on your questions. But for the time being, let's move on to the second presentation. The second presentation is going to touch on applying the water, energy, food nexus approach to climate resilient water safety planning. Lessons from Letown in India, and it's going to be given to us by Ms. Natalie Pajes Cortido, and she is a research assistant at the chair of Urban Water Systems Engineering of the Technical University of Munich, TUM. She holds a master's degree in environmental engineering from TUM, and her research interests include the water, energy, food nexus, water security, water reuse, and the implementation of nature-based solutions for climate-resilient urban water management. She has conducted research in water safety planning, decentralized water reclamation systems, and life cycle assessments. So Natalie, over to you. You have 7 minutes to deliver your talk.
Hello, all. Thank you very much. I hope you're hearing me well. So, thank you for the introduction. I'm just going to share my screen right now. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. All right. So, thank you all. Thank you for coming today. And I am going to present to you a way for integrating the water energy food nexus into climate resilient water safety planning with the case study example of Laytown. So, as you already may be familiar with, water safety plans are a methodology for risk management designed by the World Health Organization, which was designed for ensuring the safety of drinking water from the catchment to consumers. A climate resilient water safety plan is a variation of this concept methodology, which was created for addressing the increase of existing stress on water resources that come from changes in the frequency, the intensity, and the spatial distribution of weather events, which of course affects the water cycle. So, as most of the water safety plans right now are essentially managed by local water providers in each municipality, current examples of climate resilient water safety plans are focusing mostly on the water sector. And this means that potential synergies between other climate sensitive sectors related to water, such as food and energy, are being left out of the analysis, at least in an explicit way. And this can increase the vulnerability or decrease the resilience of urban water systems. So in our work, we are trying to demonstrate that addressing the synergies and trade-offs between the water, the food, and energy sectors into climate resilient water safety planning can actually contribute to manage water-related risks, while also enhancing resource security in the context of climate change. So what we see here is a sketch of the water safety plan methodology, and essentially what we're proposing is to enhance a little bit the scope abroad the water sector only, and try to also consider energy and food production considerations between this risk management approach. So in the example of Laytown in India,
Natalie, I'm sorry to
Natalie, we can't see your screen, so we will share for you.
the slide is not,
okay.
the slide is not going to
Sorry.
be-
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. Yes, I already talked about it. We can move on to the next slide. Also, that one was already there. Perfect. Yes, thank you. Okay, so this is the city that we did the case study on. The city of Laytown, India, it's a city that is located in the northernmost part of India, in the Himalayas, and is a city that is experiencing a very rapid urbanization process due to a very, very rapid increase in tourism. And therefore, there is an increase in water consumption and wastewater generation. So the city is also experiencing an interesting phenomenon in terms of groundwater contamination, since most of the sanitation is performed as on-site sanitation, which in a lot of cases is done in poorly constructed septic tanks that are having problems of leakages into a groundwater, which is the main water source of the city. So what we did here is trying to integrate the water energy food nexus approach into the system description of the water safety plan using this critical infrastructure approach that you can see here on this illustration on the right. So we can see, for example, here we can highlight some interactions in terms of critical infrastructure affected and what is going to be the impact on other critical infrastructures such as energy and food. So, for example, if the water sector where the water infrastructure is affected, then of course the food sector in the city is highly affected, as most of the irrigation or all of the irrigation, since there is a very low precipitation in the town, comes from melting water and groundwater, which is fed by aquifer recharge from glacier melting. So this is of course affected by climate change, and is something that should be considered when considering a water safety plan, for example. Also, for example, if the energy sector fails, then the water sector is highly affected, because most of the water extraction is done by bore wells, both publicly owned and privately owned. The energy provision to the town is both dependent on fossil fuels and hydropower, which are both, of course, depending and impacting climate change. So this was one of the ways to apply the water energy food system, water energy food nexus into the water safety plan. And a second way, next please, was to formulate scenarios for risk management, which exploit intersectoral synergies through water reclamation with resource recovery using constructed wetlands. Next slide, please. So here, what we tried to do was to map possible places for integrating constructed wetlands that would both treat the sewage coming from the septic tanks and take the water to an enough quality for irrigation. So here we can see the available bare land and available agricultural land, as well as the guest houses and households that could be served with these solutions. And in the next maps, we can see in this first map a risk characterization, geographical characterization of the current status. Now we see how it would look, how the risk could be reduced if these constructed wetlands were introduced as complement for the planned centralized sanitation regime. So we can see that considering water energy food nexus solutions can help to manage water-related risks. Next one, please. While also having positive impacts in overall web security. So we have on-site water generation that can irrigate and about 10% of the irrigable area of the town. And we can also have some sludge production in terms of fertilizer that could cover a very important part of the local demand. There could also be local production of food, which would of course have positive impacts on resource and web security. Next one. Just as a key takeaway, integrating the water energy food nexus in the water safety planning opens another alternative to manage both water-related risks while positively affecting the overall water energy food security. So thank you very much for hearing my talk, and I'm open for every question.
Thank you very much, Natalie, for this presentation. So once again, to participants, please write down your questions in the chat, and we will come back to that during the Q&A session. So all the questions you'd like Natalie to touch upon, please write them down, and we will come back to that. We'll have time during the Q&A session to discuss that. But for the time being, let's move on to our third presentation by Dr. N.C. Nayaranam. And the presentation is going to be on making non-sewage sanitation options work for small towns, learning from the case of Alleppey in India. So Dr. N.C. is a professor at the Ashank Desai Center for Policy Studies, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. He works at the interface of technology, development, and policy. He is also an adjunct professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, IISC campus in Bangalore. He has a Fulbright Nehru Fellow. He was a Fulbright Nehru Fellow at the University of California, Berkeley, and he was also earlier an executive director of the South Asia Consortium for Interdisciplinary Water Resource Studies and faculty at the Institute of Rural Management in Annan. So Dr. NC, the floor is yours, and you have 7 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Josiane. You can hear me and see my slide?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to take you from the northernmost end lay of the last presentation to the southernmost end of India in Kerala. It's a small town called Alapi. And we have been working there for the last 4 years. So the presentation will be on planning off-grid solutions, our experience, starting with the problem of water pollution and then the mainstream and alternative solutions. Then what is the problem in context? How do you map that? So can academic institutions be solution providers for planning off-grid? Working with local governments to scale up these solutions, and then reflecting on the scope and challenges of this experience. So this is the familiar sight in Indian cities. This is the kind of classic and universal solution of centralized technologies, highly demanding on land, energy, capital at the end of the pipe solution. So in Indian case, it excludes small cities and poor neighborhoods. And 70% of the investment goes to network costs, difficult to implement in unplanned cities. So that's why the importance of off-grid and capital costs are quite high for India. So these are the two different models that we have, which I don't have to elaborate, the on-site systems as well as the centralized sewer extensions. Why off-grid? I think it prioritizes treatment close to where it's created, use little or no water, keep different types of wastewater separate, reuse of water and nutrients possible, more cost effective based on local skills and materials, designed for small scale, flexible, contextually adaptable, cost effective for marginal settlements. And then it has been promoted in Indian policy documents also in the last decade. So how to make the off-grid planning work is one of the things that we have done in 2018. It's published in the Watch Journal. So planning the grid is actually easier because we have the thumb rule of 80% of water supply. For off-grid planning, we need the amount of flow of water, the uh, the wastewater, and which will then need kind of production at various places like houses or other institutions. Then we bring them together in a wastewater shed, like the old watersheds, overlay the socioeconomic profile, and then we have to understand the wastewater disposal mechanisms, the treatment locations that are possible, and then we need to consult with other stakeholders. So these are the major spatial, the spatial understanding, the sanitation infrastructure understanding, and then the socioeconomic profile. So this is an example where we have done the drain mapping, we have understood the wastewater shed. Then we looked at, each wastewater, each sanitation zone, which is a combination of the two. What are the socioeconomic characteristics? What is the grey water management? What are the sanitation practices? And what is the intervention that is needed? So we disaggregate the town into different entities which may need different types of interventions. But in small towns, there is no capacity. So we ask the question, can crowdsourcing of data be possible by a large number of citizens? And so that data can be collected, it can bridge interaction between citizens and government, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question we asked is, can students be citizens in such an exercise? It's important the governance realm because the global discourses which are coming in water, which when comes to national water policies. Then there is a state public water utility, which we are discussing in this conference. And bypassing all this expert knowledge and finances actually are now coming to municipalities. So can municipalities be capacitated to do the planning, assessment, technology selection, monitoring? And how can local academic institutions be trained with NGOs and other citizens to kind of support this? So this is the Alapi town, which is in the southwestern corner of India, have a network of canals, which was an old port town. This got dysfunctional. This was the earlier kind of thing where it was, used very much. Then it got into this kind of a situation. So we actually did, three winter and summer schools where mapped the natural systems of drains and canal systems. We identified the discharge points, We did household survey to understand the sanitation infrastructure, and it's all done in with mobile apps, and so it could be visually, it could be represented in GIS, and then we had a youth campaign also. So these are some of the things. So civil surveys, water quality surveys, household surveys, water quality analysis in a participatory manner, where we found that 93% of the samples that we collected had E. coli, which was actually kind of shown to the people. So a pilot intervention. So the priorities of the sanitation watersheds told us that, one of the major hotspots is a very marginal settlement, which we call a slum in India, which is 52 households that belong to the municipal workers. They had only a community toilet, so we actually provided them individual toilets, and these were all connected to a DWAT system, which has baffles and, at the end, root zone treatment. Their community toilet actually was, turned up into a study room for the children, and this is an aerobic, treatment system for the solid waste, which actually kind of, turned the system. This is their study room where during the pandemic time we gave them a TV also for the children to kind of attend the classes. Beautified this with voluntary support from the local artists. And so I think, that is one kind of a model where we can look at this. So this is my last but one slide. This is how, but then how can this be done at a city-wide scale is the question. So we need a pre-planning stage, a situational analysis where we have seen earlier, weighing of alternatives depending on the, socioeconomic, physical and financial systems. What can kind of work in each of a location, a detailing of that, and then, working with the local governance to do this. Last is the challenges for scaling up. We found that environmental engineering knowledge is a universal Western knowledge, which then gives STPs as the major solution. Technology is more industrial technologies, which are imported. Norms, the tyranny of standards like 10 BOD and all, which are universal. The political economy of decision making, international financial institutions give loans to governments, international consultancies, global visions of smart cities. The implementation interests of contractor, engineer, politician, construction nexus, and alternate networks have to be developed. That's why we talk about academic knowledge of appropriate technologies, funders, think tanks, or international to local civil society working with local governments to promote circular economy models. Finally, the most important aspect is the understanding of a situation analysis at town level to understand how and where grid and off-grid solutions work. Thank you.
Thank you, NC, very much for this great presentation. So we are going into the last presentation now. Please write again down your questions in the chat and we'll take them forward in just 7 minutes. So this last presentation is going to touch on adaptation capacities and conflict potential of rural actors in introducing water reclamation and circular economy in the First Meknes region of Morocco. And this presentation is going to be given to us by Dr. Birgit Kemmerling. And Dr. Birgit is a senior researcher at BICC. Her key competencies are in the areas of natural resource governance, especially water, resource-related conflicts, and the humanitarian systems. She holds a master's in geography from the University of Cologne and received her PhD in geography from the University of Leipzig. She has extensive research experience in Egypt and Morocco and several years of practical experience in the humanitarian assistance in Sub-Saharan Africa. Birgit, over to you, and you have 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. Yes. Thank you also for giving me the word and presenting the presentation. So I'm pleased to present today a research project BIC is currently partnering in, like BIC, the Bonn International Center of Conflict Studies. The project seeks sustainable solutions for a circular economy the rural areas, mostly in the Fez Meknes region in Morocco. So I will focus on the innovation potentials, actually, not so much on the conflict potentials today, because it's research ongoing and these are like our preliminary results. But before I will present the background of the region, the water-related challenges, and the project rationale. So please, the next slide. Thank you. So this is the project area. You see down in the small area, the Fez Meknes region, and the red field, this is the Cess plain in the Fez Meknes region, which is fed mainly by two aquifers, groundwater aquifers, but these are continuously dropping the tables, causing a lot of problems in the region. And the major reason for this is the intensification of agriculture over the past 3 decades, which have been shaped and promoted by national agricultural strategies, especially the Plan Maroc Vert from 2008 to 2020, the privatization of land in the 2000s, and the progressive exploitation of groundwater for irrigation. So the agro-production system has also shifted partially from the cultivation of cereals and forage plants to cash crops and the processing industry. So main agricultural products today are still cereals, but increasingly also fruits and vegetables, and above all, olives, but not the traditional, like they're still existing, the Moroccan olive ones, but they are new plantations which needs to be irrigated. So these irrigated olive plantations, and this which I will focus today, and they don't contribute only to an overuse of groundwater or surface water, but also the processing of the olive to olive oil creates residues, especially the olive wastewater that contributes to polluting the water and soil in the region. So this is called the olive wastewater, the margine, and it has high concentration of polyphenols. Polyphenols, paradoxically, they are very healthy for human beings, but they are toxic for the soils. So, and for the water if they are discharged unfiltered. So please, the next slide. Yeah, so this project focuses, it's the Walama project, Sustainable Technologies and Services for Water and Land Management in Morocco. And it aims to seek practical and technical solutions for the recycling and revaluation of residual materials, especially, for example, the wastewater, olive wastewater. So this means, for example, filtering out the polyphenols out of the olive wastewater and use the treated wastewater for producing, for example, fertilizer or soil conditioners. So we at BIC, we aim to capture in our sub-project the sustainable transformation in rural Morocco, and we want to analyze the opportunities and potentials that exist for innovation, but also for conflicts that arise in the region as a result of introducing these kind of new technologies. So our argument is that what needs to be taken into account are the perspectives, local perspectives, and also adaptive capacities towards environmental problems from different potential user groups, also the political context and socioeconomic differences in which they operate, and of course the acceptance that exists for these new technologies. So we have used mainly qualitative methods to analyze, to do interviews with olive mill operators on the one side and also farmers on the other side, because these are the potential user groups of these new technologies. And to illustrate the research, I would like to present or give an example of 2 different types of olive mill operators. So please, the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So one example is Najib, I have changed the names, who along with his 2 brothers runs an oil mill that his father has founded already in 1984. So initially the oil press was operated using a mule, but little by little, the family invested in electricity and modern technologies. He himself hardly grows any olives. Farmers from the area bring the olives to him, and these are mostly the local varieties existing, and they have it processed into oil because they prefer also this technology like the old press. However, the harvest of these olives depends heavily on the amount of rain, which is very unpredictable in the region because these are rain-fed olives. So Najib, and the time of the harvest is just from November to January. So Najib also, he has to run to get other revenue, and he runs a garage beside the oil mill, and there's a few hectares of his own land for farming and raising livestock. Yeah, so then we come to another example on the next slide, please. So now there is like few industrial oil mills that have been established in the Fierce Meadows region over the past few years. They mostly belong to big investors or agribusinesses that also run their own olive or fruit plantations, financed by domestic and foreign investors. They also access loans, and they have the state-of-the-art technologies to produce high-quality olive oil for the export market. And also these new technologies produce like less damaging residues and less damaging olive wastewater. They also have the capacity to invest into the reuse and revaluation of residues. And on their olive plantations, they also use other varieties, mainly coming from Spain, which are high yield varieties, but they need to be constantly irrigated, which also has the advantage for them that they have less fluctuations in the olive harvest and can make more gains. So maybe the next slide. What do these two different types show? Of course, they are not presenting the complexity of the olive sector in the region. There are also many more differences, but I think they shed some light on some potentials for innovation that we can see here and also some challenges. So first of all, they use different, like the oil mills use different technologies, and these different technologies, like the press on the one hand and the very new technologies on the others, and they also produce different olive wastewater. Like the first one, it has a much higher concentration of polyphenols, but the majority, and here it becomes a very important point of acceptance, the majority of clients that buy the olive oil, they prefer the olive oil from the press and not from the new technologies because it has a different taste, and they also prefer the old varieties. So, and the second point is the interest in new technologies. So actually for all mills that we have interviewed, this olive wastewater is the biggest problem because there are until now no technical solutions how to filtrate out the polyphenols in the region. And in addition, for them, then it causes high costs because they somehow have to get rid of it, and also often problems with state authorities. So there is actually a great interest, but, and this is the third point, it's clear that they are very, and this I hope the two types were showing, they are very different socioeconomic backgrounds and therefore potential and capacities to invest in kind of new technologies, especially because for most of the smaller ones, medium-sized oil mills, it is not the main or not the only income resource. So there could be maybe as a solution, and this is one focus of the project, that the industrial oil mills that have the capacity to invest could work as a game changer, where you could pilot some tests and also to show that it's not only ecological sustainable, but also it has some economic viability to show some incentives for others to go into this. So just to conclude, so the success of these new technologies, we found out, they depend largely, for the circular economy, depend largely in how they can be adjusted to the local context and also cultural preferences and acceptance of the different local user groups. So how to deal with different kind of wastewaters, for example, and also to the support of public institutions. For example, would there be subsidies from the state? So we had the point of governance before, and also who could be like game changers to introduce to go forward with these new technologies. Thank you. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Birgit. Again, I think you all agree with me that we had great presentations today. Not we have 15, not 15 any longer, but we have some time for questions and answers. from what I was able to hear, I have prepared some questions for our presenters. So beginning with Salome. Salome, you shared us, a number of options that could be used to ensure that we implement and we adopt water reuse practices. I would like to check with you from your experience how we can decide on one reuse model instead of another. What kind of criteria, should we bear in mind, based on the locations, based on the situation? So what are the key considerations for such a decision-making process? Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Josiane. I think to decide on a circular economy model or solution, there are a lot of criteria, a number of criteria that we have to take into consideration. For example, in terms of the what is available in the local context, what are the infrastructures available, and what are the resources available in terms of also the financing. Normally, circular economy solutions are not necessarily driven by profit maximization, but they are driven more by the need for improving the well-being, but they still have to be sustainable. They have to recover their costs. So when choosing when looking at different alternatives, I think we have to look at the supply of the materials, the input available, the need, the local need. Are there farmers, for example, who need, if we are going to talk about reusing of wastewater for crops or for aquaculture, for example? We can't propose aquaculture where there is no stabilization ponds, for example. So these are some of the aspects that we have to look at, and the enabling environment is also key for this kind of reuse models. And the profitability, it has to be there. Like I said, they have to be able to recover their costs through selling of the products and services produced from these models. And there should be a demand for those products. So cultural and perception aspects also comes in, because some people are not necessarily keen to use waste-based products. So the marketing aspect, the supply side aspect, the enabling environment aspects are some of the criteria that we have to look at. And the technology, it has to be suitable for the local context. You can't introduce a high-tech technology where there are no local capacity to operate and maintain it when it breaks down. So these are some of the things I could say for now.
Thanks a lot, Salome. Yeah, I think so many things we can follow up on. A question to Natalie now. Natalie, you talked about the nexus, water, energy, food nexus, and you showed that it was important, as part of the efforts, to build a strong nexus, to build also collaboration and partnership. But then, of course, we know that, and that is one point that came out when we had the first Menti question. It came out very strongly that we need incentives for all these parties, to get involved. So what kind of incentives are you thinking about, in your case, that we can maybe consider also in other locations? What are those incentives that can really make, provide the enabling environment that will allow the partnerships to thrive, in the long term and not just die after a few months or years? So what would you say to that?
True. What I would say to that is that, first of all, a very important part of the enabling environment is the willingness to implement such type of solutions and such types of collaborations, both from the local government, but also from the local stakeholders, including, of course, the local community and the local responsibles for the management of resources. So I think it's very important, for example, to have established common vision of what are the communal values and what is the perspective and the vision that a commonality has about the use of their land and the resources. So, for example, of Ley, I know they have a vision document, for example, where they address their problems. They know that there can be some sources of food insecurity, of water insecurity, also of energy insecurity, and they have established that they want to do actions in order to get to a point where their growth is also sustainable and goes more into streamline with their own values and their connection to nature. So I think that's a very important part of this. And I think that although incorporating different sectors other than just water adds, of course, complexity in terms of governance and of coordination of this intersectoral collaboration, it can also have additional opportunities for creating other types of incentives. For example, incentives in terms of the market value of the of the locally produced agricultural products that come from water use, for example, or the energy savings that can come from um, the replacement of groundwater withdrawals, which are now coming from, for example, low energy intensive treatment regime, such as constructed wetlands. So there are more complexities added, the more sectors are added, of course, but also there can also be other opportunities and other costs or economic benefits that can be internalized within the system. I would say that that's an important element.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natalie, for sharing your perspectives on this. NC, your presentation for LAP showed that you concluded your presentation talking about the political economy aspects. And we know that it's a very important component, and it came out also of our MEMT questionnaires, when we tested the pool and the sense from the participants. So what do you think we can do really to manage these power games, especially when it comes to wastewater treatment? There are systems that we prefer, there are technologies that we have been using to adopting, there are donors who only fund some systems and not others. So what kind of approach can we, in the different countries where we work, can we consider to try and overcome these political economy related issues?
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyn. One of my students has worked on the policy process of this, global and Indian, where one of the most fundamental things is the environmental engineering knowledge, which developed in the West, Thames got cleaned. And then that kind of technology, industrial technology, which gets imported and, which then get internalized by our technocrats at the national level, as well as at the public utility level, because that is the kind of mainstream understanding of, pollution control. And then, so our regulators also go for this tyranny of standards. And then there is, at the second level, there is the financing and implementation interests that are there. One is the international financial institutions and donors, which gives this global vision of, kind of smart cities. And then this implementation interests, contractor, engineer, politician, construction nexus, which needs these big projects. So these two actually make sure that, this is actually, working at one level. And the circular economy and appropriate technologies their interests are more local. So can you localize planning and implementation is one question that we can ask, because in the Indian case, this is actually working only for the big metro cities. This model of centralized grid thing, and it's actually bypassing many small towns. So our inquiry is this: can towns then plan it? And there's no capacity there. So then, can capacity be generated there? There are a lot of engineering colleges and other colleges in these locales, and we can demystify this knowledge. Like, well, that's what we try to do, to make it into different components, and then train local students and local volunteers to kind of make it more of a situation analysis, so that we can understand what is the small scale. One is segregation and nutrient recycling. Local skills can be used. It can be small scale and flexible. It can be more cost effective. And actually, in the policy process, from 2008, this is very dominant also, because, for example, GIZ is very active player in the policy, and they were promoting this. So this actually got into our policy documents also. But then this political economy actually makes sure that, it's actually the big projects and smart cities gets a lot of allocations.
Mhm. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that, NC. Birgit, one last question for you. Really, I liked your cases, the two examples, the parallel you made between, the small scale farmer, doing his best, with smaller amount access to resources versus the very large one with probably a lot of power and influence in the country, needing different technologies, different scales. I just want to get from you, and I know you have been working in other locations. What is the main lesson really that we can draw from that experience that you have in Morocco, which we can say we will take the same lesson and then try and make use of that also in all our works, that we are conducting all over the world. So, what would be the one key lesson that you are taking out of this life-changing experience? I believe.
Thank you very much for this question. If it's one key message that I would like to deliver, it's that really context matters. I mean, a lot of people, the other presenters have said it, but I think this example shows and I had an expert interview and he was saying most of the technologies are actually developed in the global north because there you have the capacities and the capital and whatsoever, and then they are adjusted to other places. And these also, a lot of concepts are working in the same way. So I actually think this is the wrong way. You really need to start to find, to have a good knowledge of what is the local context, what are the power relations in the local context between the different actors, how do they work together, how they interact together, where are conflicts. And this is the key message. This is essential that you know this, and then from there you can start to develop what are actually the solutions for this specific context, and not come as packages that are developed. For giving just a very brief example from our project. So if we find a solution to retreat and reuse and reevaluate the margin of the industrial oil mills, it will not have a big impact in the region because there are very few industrial oil mills. The majority are traditional ones, and the wastewater is different. So it has to be adjustable to these other margins or these other wastewaters in order to be effective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think what you are bringing in context matters is also something that we can certainly take on, in our work, having to keep in mind that we cannot just transpose something from one place to another. We have to indeed take into account the context. And I think many of our presenters today have highlighted that in different ways, in different forms. And I hope for all of you who participated in this first sub-session that you have acquired a little bit more knowledge, on what we are interested in, the innovative approaches on water reclamation, and how you can maybe start, if it is not yet the case, driving such an agenda in your countries, in your cities, with your institutions, if you are a water operator, to make sure that there is a real change that is achieved on the ground in relation to circular economy, in relation to water management, and building better and higher resilience to climate change, knowing that scarcity is going to be the future, given the urbanization rates and the number of issues that we have to deal with. So with this, I will like to close the first subsection, and then thank you all very, very much for your participation and your contributions. I would like to thank all the presenters as well for their great presentations. And I would like to hand over now to Annabelle to introduce our next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot. Sorry, I had an issue with the camera. It wasn't working well. I think, Saravanan, you wanted to introduce the next session, right?
Yes, no worries. But this first session was really good. It, on one hand, it gives an overview of the conceptual approaches to wastewater management from a researcher, and also a combination of the municipal water utility companies like in Leh that Nathalie was pointing it out. And ANC was highlighting how the so-called Western model of sewage management or grid solutions may not be appropriate in certain contexts. And then Brigitte was basically emphasizing that context matters. And the next subsession too actually flows from this sort of presentation by bringing in the water operators actually in the forefront to see to what extent some of these can be implemented or what are the challenges in getting these things implemented. So we have two presenters. One is Mr. Ozai Azebe Bonzo. He holds a master's in water supply and environmental sanitation, and he's the deputy sanitation engineer in the Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly. And Osai Asibu Bonza has served in a different positions within the Kumasi Metropolitan Authority for a long period of time, and in a both in public and also in the private space. And we should congratulate him because he has been one of the forefront person in helping or in recognizing the Kumasi Metropolitan Authority to get a dignified city awards in 2019. And he is also currently the Deputy Engineer of Waste Management Department of the Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly. And today he is going to give us a presentation of the public-private partnership initiative in wastewater reuse in Kumasi. So may I request Ozai to come on board and the presentation will be shared by our technical team.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes.
Please, can I be heard and are you able to see my screen?
No, Ozai, I think the technical team will be sharing your presentation.
Okay.
No, why? I thought Maria was sent the slides to you. If not, I can share it. It's not a problem.
Okay.
Okay, Maria is going to share it. Fine. Jose, can you, we can't see your face properly because you are in the darker side of the light.
Yeah, is it clear now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now we can see this screen. Jose?
Yep.
Yeah.
Come again?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So, my name is Jose, and I'm here to make a presentation with respect to the Sunnyfish project, as we call it in Kumasi. And this is a public-private partnership that is realizing the rearing of catfish at our sewage treatment plant. Can you please go to the next slide? Thank you very much. So the issues that have been raised that we are witnessing is that there's a challenge on one hand with respect to wastewater treatment, because in most cases we are having untreated discharge of wastewater into the environment. Next slide, please. And then also in Ghana, we realized that there is a shortage in supply in terms of fish production. So on one side, we are looking at waste management in terms of wastewater treatment, and then on the other side, we are looking at fish supply and food production in Ghana. Next slide, please. So we have a waste stabilization plant at Chapatre, which is located in Kumasi, within the Asukwa municipality, which is a suburb of the Kumasi metropolitan area. And this plant is connected to about 200 households and is serving about 1,500 people. And it's a waste stabilization plant. Next slide, please. So the conditions at the site prior to this arrangement, I'm going to show you in the next few slides. The conditions were so bad that it called up for a sustainable system of managing the facility in terms of financing. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so as you can see, these are NRO ponds which were silted, and the site, next slide, please. The site also became bushy. You can see the site office on the left-hand side, the wooden structure was a very poor one, and then it required an intervention. Can you go to the next slide, please? So you could also see that a lot of animals were using the site as their habitat, and snakes were breeding all over the place. And then you could have criminals also using the place as their hideout, and people were encroaching the land. So they called for a partnership. The partnership was between the Kumasi Metropolitan Assembly, Trimark Aquaculture Services, a private company, and then IMI. So IMI was there to provide the technical advice for the business, and KMA also is the Metropolitan Assembly. We are in charge of the place. We own the land, and Trimark is a business company which is into fish culture. So we signed an MOU to undertake this facility. So basically what is happening is that after the sign of the MOU or the agreement or the PPP arrangement, the site had to undergo a number of changes. And what we are seeking to do is all to generate funding to put it back into the management of the facility in a form of a circular economy. So there are three forms of generating the funding. As you can see, we have our system there, which is the treated wastewater system. The influence comes into biodigesters, anaerobic ponds, through facultative ponds, and to maturation ponds. At the maturation pond, we are putting brood stocks of fish. Because when we started, we were using the maturation pond as our fish pond. But then we realized that there was a challenge with the stigma of people having to eat right from the sewage treatment ponds. And therefore, we decided to use the maturation pond as for our brood stocking. And then after the brood stocking, we are putting it back. We are putting it back into a hatchery where we have a tank which we use for fingerling production. And this tank is we're having water, fresh water from underground to put in the tank to hatch our fingerlings. And then from that side, you realize that we are selling the fingerlings to other farmers who want to use it in their fish farms. And then we are applying back the money into the system. After that, we also rear the catfish from the fingerlings in concrete tanks. And then when they are ready, we smoke them and then we sell them for also some financing back into the management of the facility. And then we've also added the vegetable production where we've grown vegetable in a greenhouse, and the water from the concrete tanks are being used to that effect. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is what we have there. The greenhouse is located on the far left corner, and then we have the waste stabilization ponds. These are the maturation ponds where we have the brood stocks, and then we have the culture tank and also the hatchery on your right hand side. And below left, you can see the catfish that has been cultured and ready for sale. We also have some tomato produced from the greenhouse. Next slide, please. And then next slide. So effectively, after this initiative, we are having a clean site which has been fenced and people are not able to use it. Criminals are not able to use it to ply their trade. And also, we've also been able to prevent the breeding of snakes at the site. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. So now, as a result of this project, you see that we've had a very beautiful site office where business is going on there. And this is a photograph of myself and a colleague of mine with a ready-made catfish for sale in the market. Next slide, please. Yeah. So thank you very much. I must also add that during this process, we've had a number of challenges, and then we were able to go through them. And now the business is ongoing. Some of the challenges that we have faced, as I mentioned earlier, is the issue of the market and people knowing that the fish is coming from a waste stabilization pond. So the way that we have been able to go around it is using the brood stocking and making sure that the catfish is now being reared from the tanks, which is receiving water from underground. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Jose, for giving such a brief presentation and also highlighting a little bit on how the public-private partnership initiative between the Kumasi and the Trimark has been worked out. And not only that, it has also been supported with the International Water Management Institute. So
Yes.
I see a good partnership between water utilities along with the knowledge center such as IMI that is coming into place. And very good example. Thank you so much, Jose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go into the next presenter, can we have the Mentimeter question, Maria?
Thanks.
Yes. Please, all the audience and participants, you can go into the menti.com and use the code 6660279. I think you may have two questions that we have put forward for you. It would be nice to see how to see your response to it. Thank you. Oh, that's really good. Helps in the pollution treatment process is something that has been responded by many of the participants. It reduces the financial pressure on the local government is something being highlighted by the audience. That's quite nice to see. While in terms of profit making or poor environmental regulations, well, the profit making capacity of private companies ensures efficiency. That's really increasing in terms of the response. Wow. Okay. Good to see these bars jumping around. So finally, one of the things that comes out is the public-private partnership in sewage management can reduce the financial pressure. Okay, next question, how to regulate the private companies for efficient sewage management? Strengthen the local government regulation has been highlighted by almost 70% of the audience. Involve civil society. That's quite good to see. In fact, there is no suitable for profit-making sector. No response on that. Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much for this response. I think it's nice to take this into account in the next presentation, which will be given by Mr. Manas Rath. Manas Rath is a senior advisor for the BODA. BODA is one of the NGO, the Bremen Overseas Research and Development Association that is based in Germany, and he, along with his colleague from the Udaipur Metropolitan Authority Municipal Corporation, Mr. Shibashis Dasgupta, will be sharing their experience on the public-private partnership initiative in sewage management in Udaipur city. Udaipur is a city on the northwest part of India. Mr. Manas Rath is part of the BODA and is focusing primarily on developing business models for increasing coverage of sanitation services in underdeveloped communities, overseeing projects and developing partnership, particularly in the private sector. And Manas Rath has been having several hats in his profession, to his profile. He's the founder of the Blue Water Company, which aims to deliver world-class fecal sludge management and wastewater management services to smaller cities and campuses to reduce water pollution and increase reuse of treated wastewater. He's basically trying to convert the sewage into the gold, the black gold. Earlier, before he was with the BODA and with the Blue Water Company, he was the director of an NGO and supported social enterprises to become more effective at scale. Manas is a graduate of Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Sloan School of Management, has attended programs at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. He also serves in the Indian government Swachh Bharat Task Force and is advisor to social startups and non-profit organizations, including Shelter Association, UNS Corporate Action Tank. And in addition to his profession, he is also a Reiki master and a teacher. So yeah, outside this session, if you want to interact with him on Reiki, he is also quite a good person for that. Thank you very much, Manas. Please, it's your floor.
Thank you very much, Sarvanan, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you everyone. Will you be presenting the slides, or should I try to present from my side? Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you very much. Just at the outset, let me just mention that we also do a lot of work on capacity building of local government, of municipalities. So we are not entirely focused on just looking at how to privatize services. And I'm also very proud to be currently enrolled in the PhD program in technology and policy at the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Mumbai, Bombay, where Professor NC is one of my professors. So with that, today what we'll be talking about is a specific case study in Udaipur, where a public-private partnership for sewage treatment has been working quite well for the last several years, and we did some interesting research on that. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So in 2008, just a little bit of history. Just wait, please. I'll let you know when to. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. So 2008, there's an interesting move for where regulations were released on decentralized sewage treatment plants, where bulk polluters, so large buildings, housing societies, campuses, malls, etc., office complexes, were required to have their own sewage treatment plant to take pressure off the municipal or the public system. It's been very, very poorly implemented, very patchy, depending on which city you go to. Very little monitoring by the state pollution control boards, and therefore it's a policy that has not worked well. But a different topic for a different day. If that policy was implemented really well at a very, very small cost, the public sector, the government could transfer this responsibility to the private space and also promote the reuse of the treated water. In 2015, the Central Pollution Control Board found that at least 45% of municipal sewage treatment plants are underperforming, in the sense they do not meet standards, and at least 20% of them are completely non-functional. So that 65% of your built capacity is basically not doing its job. Since 2016-17, we have seen large investments in sewage treatment capacity through various government programs, including the Smart City Mission, which has come up before. Next, please. And today you have a situation where urban India releases probably in the order of 60 to 70 billion liters of wastewater per day, of which at least 40 billion goes untreated into the environment. Okay, and the next one, this results in Indian cities having the dirtiest urban water in the world. That's what the research shows. 28% of the 28 of the 30 largest cities have huge water shortages. Next, please. And integrated, now what we are finding is integrated build and operate contracts and hybrid annuity models are becoming more popular. And the next one, but the reuse, the treated wastewater reuse still remains very, very close to 0% in the public domain. Where you have private STPs, they do reuse the water for various applications, including flushing, landscaping, etc. Next slide, please. And you can just click a few times. Sorry, I had animation in here, so it might be a bit troublesome. Udaipur in sort of in northwestern India, you can see it over there. It's in Rajasthan, which is a desert state, but Udaipur itself is actually very green. It's in a mountain range. It's got a lot of lakes and greenery. It is one of the oldest cities in India with a population now of about 600,000 people. Very, very popular tourist destination. Also, the fair amount of light industry. Next, please. And we can go to the next one. It's ranked number 48, which I kind of disagree with. This ranked number 48 in the ease of living index. It's actually a very nice town to visit, but you can see the pictures there. beautiful scenery, crowded streets, but a lot of heritage, and it's fairly well maintained actually among smaller towns, mid-sized towns of India. It's a relatively well maintained place. They do earn a fair amount of revenue through tourism. Therefore, there's also a local responsiveness to maintain the city well. Next slide, please. Now, Udaipur generates about 70 million liters of sewage per day and about 230 tons per day of solid waste. Next. You can just click a few times and go down. Only 35% of the city is currently covered with sewer networks, which is being expanded under the Smart City mission, with a heavy dependency on on-site sanitation. Now, in the last 20 years, the city has spent at least 60 million euro on expanding the sewer network. Okay, and they're expecting about 60%, 57% sewer coverage in the next year or two, let's say. Hindustan Zinc Limited is a very prominent local company. It used to be a public sector enterprise. It was majority sold to a global company called Vedanta, and they have operations just outside the town, which is very water and energy intensive for zinc smelting. Next, please. So in 2014, Hindustan Zinc and the local municipality got into their first public-private partnership to set up a STP, and the contract was that the municipality will deliver the sewage to Hindustan Zinc, and they can treat it and reuse it. Since then, they've entered into 3 new contracts in the last 3 years or so. Through these contracts, we'll see the details below. We can click one more time. Hindustan Zinc has effectively paid about 70% of the capex and opex for this entire infrastructure, and they get to use 85% of the treated water. The remaining 15% has to be released into the local river. This was probably the first major STP public-private partnership where there was also a clear reuse objective, which was interesting. So this table, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but you see that if you look at the second last column, in the first contract, Hindustan Zinc bore 93% of the total cost, life cycle cost almost. We did the analysis for only 15 years. The contract was 15 years. In the subsequent ones, they're bearing a lower percentage of the cost because in the first contract, they used 100% of the water was for them. The next few, they're only allowed to use 85% of the water. So you see they're also bearing a lower part of the cost. The second, third, and fourth contract, you see there's an annuity to Hindustan Zinc in the third last column. So what the government has done is in the first contract, the government paid part of the capex and then said, now all operating costs are yours and all the water is yours, right? In the next 3, they use the hybrid annuity model where the government pays a part of the capex, but they also pay a part of the operating cost. So they defer the capex payment, over the life cycle. And these are 22.5-year contracts. Initially, they were 20 years. Then they were extended for 2.5 years. And so you see that the Hindustan Zinc pays 70% and the government pays 30% of the cost. Next, please. Okay. We'll go down a couple of this thing. Now, benefit to government is very clear. They pay only 30% of the capex and opex. There's no operating responsibility. There's an environmental benefit that there's less water pollution, there's less fresh water extraction, and for the innovation they get certain brownie points, win some awards, etc. The benefits to Hindustan Zinc is good citizenship. They use some of their corporate social responsibility funds for this project, and they get a reliable source of water. Because the sewage, you can pretty much count that the sewage is going to arrive to you, and therefore you get water regardless of season. You get that water. But now, what's the cost to the government? They still pay 100% of the sewerage cost and the operating cost for running the sewer system, which we saw was over 60 million euro just for the construction. And the next point is that if they were not getting this water, they would be buying this water Hindustan Zinc, and therefore you lose the sale of bulk water because now they don't buy it from the utility, and that's where it gets interesting. If you look at the table, the amount of sewage will increase as the sewer network expands. So you see a 2020 and a 2040 comparison. With that, the STP capacity utilization goes up. This is the treated wastewater used by Hindustan Zinc will also go up along with that, from 26 million liters a day to 47 million liters. This is 26 MLD, yes, and to 47. Now, over the 22.5 years, Hindustan Zinc gets a total of 325 billion liters of treated wastewater. And the next line shows that their total cost, capex plus opex, in our estimate, is about 80 million euro over 22 years, right? Now that brings the cost per kiloliter of treated wastewater for them at 24 euro cents. The industrial water tariff today is at 71 euro cents per kiloliter. Okay, so clearly, just our estimate is that in 2021 alone, they save 1.7 million euro by investing in this infrastructure and picking up this project. And over 22 years, they could be saving as much as, I think, yeah, 240. That sounds a little off, but actually, well, yeah, I think no, that's right. Yeah, 240 million euro is what they might save on water cost alone over 22 years. So the question comes down to, is the contract fair? Yes, it's a win-win, as the title suggests, at some level. But then when they're saving this much of money on a relatively small investment, is it really a fair contract? And the next point is, and now when there was a proposal to do fecal sludge management at the same facility, Hindustan Zinc kind of dragged their feet and did not want to do it because there was no benefit to their business by doing that. As a result, the city, if they had their own STP, they could have co-located various waste treatment, taken advantage of a nexus kind of situation. But by doing this public-private partnership, they actually were not able to do that, or they've not been able to do it so far. So there are also certain challenges with going down the PPP route, especially when your partner, the private partner, has got a very, very clear vested interest or a very clear agenda of why they're entering into this. So those are the 2 points I would like to leave this presentation with. It's an interesting case study because there's a clear reuse at the end, and that made it interesting. There's another very short, in a minute I'll say, the New Delhi Water Board tried a project where they decentralized. They opened up 7 locations in 7 public parks, and they opened a tender where they said partners can come in, they can use whatever technology they want, they will get space from the government, and the sewage will be delivered to them, and they can use whatever technology they want to treat it, and then the government will basically buy the sewage from them, pay them on a per KLD basis. And here you had nature-based technologies as well as mechanized SBR, MBR, MBBR technologies used. They plan to
Hello. I think he got cut off. We lost him. Okay. Okay. So while we wait for Manas to come back, very interesting presentation and highlighting some of the public-private partnership, the challenges in public-private partnership, where the private companies can't invest beyond certain levels for their own profit-making interest. Now I have 2 questions to both the presenters. While Manas joins, I will pose this first question to Ozai. He did highlight a little bit on that during his presentation, but maybe I would give the floor to him, Ozai. Given your experience in Kumasi Metropolitan Authority, was there any reluctance from the people in buying the fish from the treated water compared to the fish that is cultivated or captured or caught from the natural environment? That is something very specific to your presentation. But in a larger sense, from your experience also being a government official, do you think a poor cost recovery and uncertain regulatory framework that is widely prevalent in Global South, does it hinder public-private partnerships participations in the sewage management? Thank you. I'll give the floor to you.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So I think that you couldn't have put it any better, because especially for a PPP that relies on someone managing the public facility and then collecting a user fee for it, it is very difficult because there are not much in terms of the enforcement of the bylaws, even though there could be such bylaws to ensure that people do not default the payment. It is difficult in terms of ensuring that people do so or enforcing the bylaw. So then it becomes a difficulty in terms of the institutional regulations that are in place. And also in terms of the financing, again, sometimes because of for political reasons, the assemblies are not able to charge the actual economic user fees because the politicians will need their votes and they do not really want to emburden the populace. So it becomes a difficulty in that sense, especially given the sector of sanitation, where if you have a sewage plant like that, the they flush the toilet and it goes away from their compound. So once they do not see the effect of whatever the situation is at the disposal site or where the toilet is going, they cannot be bothered and therefore they always refuse to pay. But if you have a system like we have put in place, where the private person is actually in charge of the management, the production of whatever it is that we are producing, in this case, fish, and of it, and they control the sale and the revenue that is coming in. It is much easier for the private sector to make sure that whatever monies that are coming is being put back into the management of the facility.
Thank you so much, Jose. I would also open the floor to the other panelists. If you have a question or comments on the presentation, please feel free to do that. While we are still expecting his presentation, I would also pose question, or first let me give the time to the panelists if they have any questions to our two presenters, Ozai and Manas. So please feel free to join.
My question is to Manas, but let's wait for him.
Okay. NC, I think you can just move forward because Manas is still joining. NC?
Yeah, I have actually put it in the chat also.
You put it in the chat?
Yeah. So, I was seeing it.
Okay. So your question is what is the
the second question is the kind of modalities of implementation where it's a very powerful company and the local government or the public utility in a very opaque kind of a situation, where nobody knows about the data, like, what is the kind of quantity of water coming, what is the kind of annuities that are fixed, and, those kinds of issues, how do you manage? It's a policy question, which is actually a big question in PPPs also.
Yeah. Ozai, did you get the question?
I struggle to hear, but I think it's more about the PPP arrangement and how we are checking the revenues and sharing the profit at the end of the year. Is that so?
No, it's talking about the power relations between the various companies. The companies are largely the big players, and then the government becomes a small player in it. So how is the power relations handled between these two?
How is the power relation between the government and the company?
Yes.
Oh, well, so in actual sense, in terms of government, I think it can be zeroed down to the waste management department because, at the level of the assembly, once the facility is not plowing back enough revenue, it becomes more like the assembly is not particularly concerned about what happens there, except, of course, the waste management department. And also, as long as the people are being served and the facility is being well managed, the assembly can sleep because that is our concern. And the private person is also in to make sure that they make some profit. So in that sense, there isn't much power because there isn't much of a conflict of interest in terms of what the private person is looking at and what the assembly, on the other hand, is also seeking to achieve. So it becomes a very cordial relationship in that sense.
Thank you, Zai. I think we have to miss Manas. He had a very good presentation, but we are still not getting him online. But very interesting presentation. The session one highlighted some of the conceptual and theoretical ones. Of course, drawing from the empirical evidence from different parts of the world, it highlighted how sewage wastewater could be transformed for effective use for water, energy, and food nexus, and also in enhancing the livelihoods of the people and so on. And the second session basically highlighted, given the examples or operational examples from the water operators in the city Kumasi and from the Udaipur city, where they have been able to implement the so-called public-private partnership in a more successful manner. Having said that, the challenges are immense. These are all models which we try to show it to the outside world, but scaling up is a challenge in many parts of the world, and including the cases that the presenters highlighted that. And given that, they one has to take with caution in taking scaling up the public-private partnership initiative in a wide-ranging perspective. And the second point is also on the technology front. Can we go for a grid or off-grid or a combination of it, or in a different form of innovative approach? It is something that needs to be thought about given the high cost involved in the grid solution. And though there is no much cost in off-grid solution, but the problems are plenty from the sanitation workers who have been primarily engaged in these sort of industry or the sector, and also in terms of the informality that prevails in many parts of the world. And the third part, which is very important, is the governance aspects of sewage management. And this is something, a vacuum in many parts of the world. And though the cases highlights, in some cases, there have been efforts to make it happen, but it is more a technocentric approach that has been followed on. And it is important to see that there is a stronger role of governance mechanism in sewage management that can enhance the public and private partnership involvement in the sewage management for a sustainable production of food, energy, and also for sustainable livelihood in the region. And with that, I would come to the end of the session, and I will, if there are no any more questions, I think Manas has joined, is it? Sorry. If there are no any more questions or comments, then we would go about thanking all the panelists, the Born Water Network, Annabelle for giving us this opportunity, the GOOPA for giving us this particular forum to share some of the experiences of these water operators and the researchers who have been involved closely with the water operators in sharing the public-private interest or in enhancing sewage management in different parts of the countries in the world. And to all the panelists from Solami from International Water Management Institute, NC Narayanan from IIT Bombay, Nathalie from Technical University in Munich, Birgit from the Bonn International Center for Conflict Studies, and Mr. Ozai from the Kumasi Metropolitan Authority, and to Manas Rath from Boda, and to his colleague from the Udaipur Development Authority. And we are so grateful to you for sharing your interesting insights on the sewage management in this particular forum. And I thank everybody and the GOAPA and Yulia and the technical team, Maria, and for giving us all the support for this particular forum. And thank you. So please stand by for the following sessions that is coming up with the GOAPA. Thank you so much for all of you.
Thank you, Sharavanan.
What? Already over?
No, we have plenty more options to continue the discussions and peer exchange beyond the Congress.
Tell me more. What are the options?
Well, Shiwopa membership, for example. By becoming a member of Shiwopa, everyone can connect to a global alliance of practitioners and experts. There are two ways of becoming a member. First, institutional members. Institutions can participate in Shiwopa's assemblies and are eligible to run and vote in its international steering committee elections. Or second, individual members. Individuals can connect and engage with peers in the online Shiwopa community. We have created a space that allows for networking and easy communication. Meet future WOP partners, stay up to date on project opportunities, and participate in peer-to-peer learning opportunities.
Sounds great. How can I join?
Simply go to www.shiwopa.org and register for free. If you want to know more, you can follow Shiwopa on social media and subscribe to the newsletter. Thanks for joining the 4th Global WOPS Congress. We'll see you soon.